Good evening and welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your night to join us for this public informational meeting. This is a meeting for Gogebic County 2025 High Risk Erosion Area Update. My name is Ryan Blazik. I'm with EGLE's Environmental Support Division. I'm just going to be your moderator for tonight's public meeting. And as moderators, I have a few things that I need to go through before we get started here. Next slide, please. All right, this is what our agenda is going to look like. We're starting off with an introduction. That's what we're doing right now. And this public information session will consist of an informational session where EGLE is going to describe the high-risk erosion area update. And then there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions related to the update. And we'll also cover how to submit an official comment and who to contact with further questions. All right, in case you haven't joined us for one of these public information sessions before, a couple things to keep in mind. All lines are going to be muted during the meeting, so you'll be able to hear us, but we can't hear you. You can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A box in your Zoom toolbar. Like I mentioned, we'll have a public information Q&A after the presentation that EGLE is going to be giving. You also have an opportunity to ask your question verbally with your microphone. We'll explain how we'll do that a little bit later once we get to that portion of the night. And then also, just so you're aware, we are recording this meeting, so it'll be posted on our YouTube channel in a couple days if you should choose to watch it again or would like to forward it on. All right. At this time, I'd like to introduce our EGLE presenter and EGLE staff who's going to be answering questions tonight, Zach Chamberlain. Zach is a Great Lakes Shoreline Specialist with EGLE Water Resources Division. So welcome, Zach, and feel free to take it away when you're ready.
Thanks, Ryan, for the introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. As Ryan said, I am Zach Chamberlain, the Great Lakes Shoreline Specialist within EGLE's Water Resource Division, which means I run our high-risk erosion area and critical dune area programs. So tonight we're going to be going over, like Ryan said, the Gogebic County 2025 High-Risk Erosion Area Update Study. Gogebic County was last studied in 1982, and the current designations are from 1983. So we will go, we'll give an overview of erosion and what high-risk erosion areas are, so some background. We'll then get into the details of the 2025 study, the methods, and how we got to our results. And then we will dive into the designation process, what designation means, as well as the permitting process for building a structure in a high-risk erosion area. So to start us off, we know that the shorelines of the Great Lakes are a dynamic and quickly changing environment. Erosion is an ongoing natural shoreline process on the Great Lakes, and it's affected by fluctuating water levels, storm events, groundwater seeps, surface water runoff, geology, human modifications of the shoreline. All these things add to erosion. So water levels affect erosion, and the Army Corps of Engineers tracks water levels in the Great Lakes. Water levels on Lake Superior are currently below the long-term average. Water levels are influenced by several factors, but they're primarily controlled by precipitation and evaporation. So back like in 2019, 2020, when we had those record high water levels, it was preceded by a period of above average precipitation. And while we can't say for certain how water levels will change in the future, we can make predictions. So the Army Corps of Engineers releases these 6-month coordinated forecasts for each of the Great Lakes. They are currently predicting that Lake Superior will remain near or below its long-term average. And so you can see that the green line representing the most likely scenario, but as we get further out, there is a cone of error around that line, so it could go either way. And while we can't make specific predictions about what will happen in the future, we do know for certain that lake levels will change and that we are likely to have another high water event in the future that will cause increased erosion. And water levels themselves do not actually cause the erosion, but they allow those waves generated by storms and wind to reach the shoreline more readily. All right, so the impact of erosion on structures was first identified as a concern by the Michigan legislature in the 1960s. Our high-risk erosion area program was established in 1970 with the passage of Public Act 245, and in 1994 it was included in Public Act 451. If you're unfamiliar, in 1994, the legislature took all of our existing environmental and natural resource protection statutes and consolidated them into one big law called the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. You'll sometimes hear us call it NEREPA. So high-risk erosion areas comes from Part 323 of the NERIPA, which is Shorelines Protection and Management. The intent of the high-risk erosion area program, you might also hear me say HREA, is to prevent structural property loss, and the department is directed to study the Great Lakes shorelines, identify hazard areas, document long-term rates of erosion, and establish setbacks to minimize the hazard of building along rapidly eroding shorelines. So our studies result in alerting property owners to the long-term erosion hazard. They help communities and property owners to design and locate developments and homes that are less vulnerable to erosion. And they can also help reduce the need for shoreline modifications like seawalls or revetments by requiring structures to be located a safe distance from the edge of active erosion. So within a high-risk erosion area, when a property owner proposes to build a new structure or add on to an existing structure, we provide for a setback based on the local rate of erosion that we find in our studies. Local communities can take over the permitting process by adopting and enforcing a zoning ordinance which meets or exceeds state standards. All right, so we've mentioned it several times now, but what is a high-risk erosion area actually? So according to the administrative rules of Part 323, a high-risk erosion area is where erosion is occurring at an average rate of 1 foot per year or more over a minimum period of 15 years. These areas are considered to be at risk for structure loss if structures are built too close to the edge of the shoreline. The original studies back in the 1980s, they occurred between 1980 and 1986, resulted in high-risk erosion area designations in 36 counties. EGLE began doing the second round of studies in those same counties in 1993. We are almost completed with all of the study, with all going back through the counties a second time. And so we just have a couple more. Gogebic County was on the list to get updated as well. And so as a result of the studies, we have currently high-risk erosion areas in 28 counties. And I do want to make sure I point out that it's important to remember that erosion is occurring whether or not the shoreline is designated as a high-risk erosion area. Erosion is a natural coastal process along our Great Lakes shorelines, and just because it's not going at 1 foot or more per year doesn't mean that it might not erode. So to determine where a high-risk erosion area is, the first thing we have to do is identify the erosion hazard line. This is a photo from, I believe, Little Girls County Park that I took back in August of 2023. The erosion hazard line is defined as the most landward edge of active erosion. This line is often the edge of vegetation, or it may be the top of a bluff. Along an armored shoreline, it's often the top or landward side of that armoring structure, like a seawall. During the study, we identified the erosion hazard line on both historic and modern aerial photos. We then measure the difference in the location of that erosion hazard line between the two, the photos, the modern and the historic. This allows us to capture the effects of fluctuating conditions such as water levels and storms that contribute to erosion. For Gogebic County, we used historic photos from 1977 and compared those to modern photos taken in 2023. They were chosen because they have several characteristics that are favorable for our comparison to capture that overall rate of recession over the long term. That includes spanning the minimum required 15 years, that they had similar water levels, they covered both periods of both high and low water levels, they were leaf off, and they had good clarity in the appropriate scale. After we determined the erosion hazard line on each photo set, we measured the rate of erosion at 150-foot intervals along the shoreline. The erosion hazard lines are drawn using Esri Arc Pro software, and then we use a program that was developed by the United States Geological Survey called DSAS, or Digital Shoreline Analysis System. So in this slide, you can see our two erosion hazard lines. The background is the 2023 aerial photograph. The green line, let me see if I can get my pointer going real quick, actually. The green line is that erosion hazard line that was identified in the 1977 photo. And then the red line is the current, or was the erosion hazard line in that 2023 photo. The yellow lines are the transects that are generated using that digital shoreline analysis system. And then the rate of change is calculated for each transect. So once we get all of our transects and our rates, we review the data and we group similar rates together and then calculate the projected recession distance, which is usually the setback, for 30 and 60 years as required by the administrative rules. They use 30 and 60 years in the administrative rules because it relates to the typical lifetime of a mortgage. The rules require us to add an additional 15 feet for short-term erosion events like a storm. So within a proposed high-risk erosion area, if the projected recession distance when measured from that erosion hazard line extends off of the lakeshore parcel and onto the next parcel landward, both parcels are designated. And so you can see that formula here. The projected recession distance is calculated by taking the average annual rate multiplied by either 30 years or 60 years. And then as the rules direct us to do, we add that 15 feet for severe short-term erosion events. Okay, so moving into the findings of the Gogebic County study. The shoreline in the county has been affected by erosion both historically and currently. In some of the previous high-risk erosion areas, recession continues at a rate that would require additional or continued designation. In other areas, natural variations in recession rates or human interventions, such as the harbor structures like at Black River Harbor, have reduced recession rates. In some areas not previously identified as a high-risk erosion area, recession has accelerated. So in 1982, the study designated 4.4 miles of Ironwood Township as high-risk erosion area. Our current study has found that 2.3 miles of that previously designated shoreline no longer meets high-risk erosion area criteria and should be de-designated. This is most likely due to natural variations in recession rates or due to improved study methods and accuracy compared to the 1983 study or 1982 study. We also found that 2.93 miles of Ironwood Township meet the criteria for designation as a high-risk erosion area. Of that 2.93 miles, 0.83 miles of it would be considered a new designation, shorelines that were not previously designated. And 2.1 miles of that total 2.93 are shorelines that were previously designated in 1983 and continue to recede at rates of 1 foot or more per year. And so these are some of the photos, both the top photos of proposed high-risk erosion areas, as well as this photo of a proposed high-risk erosion area. And then this is an example of an area that is proposed to be de-designated. As you can see, it does not have the same kind of evidence of ongoing and active erosion as the other photos. So within the county, we studied all of the areas that were previously designated in 1983, along with areas that may have experienced recession based on observations from a variety of sources. So we use aerial photography, we use oblique photography, we use EGLE permit reports out of our Marquette district office, as well as contacted the local EGLE staff and local officials. Our study area included the entirety of the Ironwood Township shoreline. Wakefield Township was excluded from the study due to the vast majority of its shoreline being located within publicly owned lands that are unlikely to be developed in the future. So moving into our proposed high-risk erosion areas, high-risk erosion area, or proposed high-risk erosion area J, which we've given the name Lake Road, is a new designation. Here, Clay Bluff overlies a bedrock toe. That clay is susceptible to erosion from multiple sources. That includes wave runup, and clay is also really susceptible to groundwater discharge. Unfortunately, there was no public access to this shoreline during our study. However, aerial imagery and oblique photos, such as the one shown, contain evidence of erosion that are typical of a high-risk erosion area, like slumping soils and fallen trees. So within proposed high-risk erosion area J, the rate of recession was found to be 1.4 feet per year. The proposed high-risk erosion area contains 4 parcels. The 30-year projected recession distance is 55 feet, and the 60-year projected recession distance is 100 feet. Continuing east, we have proposed high-risk erosion area K, or Little Girls Point West. Proposed high-risk erosion area K contains 1 parcel and is located immediately east of Oman Creek, near Little Girls Point. During our August 2023 fieldwork, significant erosion was observed on site. As you can see here, this clay bluff was in an active state of erosion due to both wave runup, groundwater discharge, and stormwater runoff. So as I mentioned, the proposed high-risk erosion area K contains 1 large parcel that was previously designated in 1983. This is a lower setback that we found for this parcel. So the rate of recession was found to be 1.04 feet per year, which again is lower than what it previously was. The 30-year projected recession distance is 45 feet, and the 60-year projected recession distance is 75 feet. So continuing just a little bit east, we have proposed high-risk erosion area L, or Little Girls Point East. It is located immediately east of high-risk erosion area K, and this proposed high-risk erosion area contains 3 parcels. During our August 2023 fieldwork, evidence of active erosion along the clay bluff typical of a high-risk erosion area was observed, such as, again, the slumping soils, the falling trees, evidence that we would expect to see in a high-risk erosion area. So proposed high-risk erosion area L, as I mentioned, contains 3 parcels, but due to variations in the recession rates, variations that were found to be significant, high-risk erosion area L is split into 2 sub-areas. For the 2 parcels in high-risk erosion area L1, this is a lower setback. It was identified to be 1 foot per year, with a 30-year projected recession distance of 45 feet and a 60-year projected recession distance of 75 feet. For the parcel located in high-risk erosion area L2, this is an increased setback. It was found to be 1.6 feet per year, with a 30-year projected recession distance of 65 feet and a 60-year projected recession distance of 110 feet. The higher recession rate in L2 could be due to a variety of factors. We kind of hypothesized that it could be due to the change in shoreline orientation and potential exposure to waves from different directions at the location of L2, where there's the large bend in the shoreline. Okay, jumping pretty far east, we now have proposed high-risk erosion area M, or Black River. High-risk erosion area M is located within a former high-risk erosion area, and during our August 2023 fieldwork, the area was observed to be actively eroding, again composed of clay, and that clay bluff was subject to wave energy, groundwater discharge, and stormwater runoff, again all typical of our high-risk erosion areas. High-risk erosion area, or proposed high-risk erosion area M, contains 2 parcels, one of which is split in half. So there is a parcel here that actually extends on both sides of the harbor structure. The river mouth is eroding on the southwest side, but it is accreting on the northeast side. So we didn't designate the northeast portion of this parcel because the erosion rates were negative, meaning that we were accreting. This proposed high-risk erosion area had the highest rate of recession found during our study. So the rate of recession is identified at 2.4 feet per year. The 30-year projected recession distance is 85 feet, and the 60-year projected recession distance is 160 feet. All right, our last proposed high-risk erosion area is high-risk erosion area N, which I gave the name Northeast Forest Land because it's, I believe, predominantly owned by logging companies. High-risk erosion area N is located to the northeast of Black Harbor. We could not access the site during the August 2023 fieldwork, and it's difficult to see in here, but there is areas of active erosion up here where the proposed high-risk erosion area is located. Aerial imagery and oblique photos also provided evidence of active erosion of the clay bluff located at this site. Those observations, again, being typical of a high-risk erosion area like slumping soils and fallen trees. So high-risk erosion area N contains a pretty significant amount of shoreline, and it has 3 large parcels split between 4 sub-areas because the rates of recession were significantly different from one another. For one parcel, which is split between areas N1 and N2, this is a new designation. For the 2 parcels located in N3 and N4, this is a continued designation. They were previously designated. So for high-risk erosion area N1, the rate was identified at 1 foot per year, with a 30-year projected recession distance of 45 feet and a 60-year projected recession distance of 75 feet. Within N2, the rate was found to be 2 feet per year, a 30-year projected recession distance of 75 feet, and a 60-year projected recession distance of 135 feet. Within high-risk erosion area or proposed high-risk erosion area N3, this is an increased setback. The rate was found to be 1.5 feet per year, with a 30-year projected recession distance of 60 feet and a 60-year projected recession distance of 105 feet. N4 is also an increased setback. It was found to have a rate of 1.3 feet per year, with a 30-year projected recession distance of 55 feet and a 60-year projected recession distance of 95 feet. And here's an overview of the aerial imagery showing the 4 sub-areas within high-risk erosion area N. So this table summarizes the current status of high-risk erosion areas in Gogebic County. This table is from the report that's posted online at michigan.gov/shorelands. The county has 30.1 miles of shoreline. We narrowed our focus to approximately 25 miles of shoreline. We are proposing 5 new high-risk erosion areas, 4 of which fall entirely or partially within an existing high-risk erosion area. We're proposing to remove the designation from all other high-risk erosion areas that were designated in 1983. The highest 30-year setback is 85 feet, and the lowest is 45 feet from the landward edge of active erosion. The highest 60-year setback proposed is 160 feet, and the lowest is 75 feet from the same point on the shoreline. And again, I want to mention that this, along with our entire report, is available online at michigan.gov/shorelands. Okay, so what does designation mean? Designation as a high-risk erosion area means that the property owner has more information when it comes to deciding the best location to minimize the potential impacts of erosion for their future home, addition, or new septic system. When a building is not at risk from erosion, the shoreline does not need to be changed or hardened with rocks or seawalls. And within designated areas, existing buildings do not have to be moved back to meet setbacks, but future additions may need to meet setbacks or be placed on the landward side of a structure. A permit from EGLE is required for new buildings, additions to existing buildings and septic systems. And the EGLE permit is needed before the issue, or is typically needed before the issuance of a local building permit. And as always, other local, state, and federal permits may apply. So our designation timeline is here. We sent out, I believe the date was September 23rd, letters to all affected property owners as well as local officials. We're holding this public meeting tonight. There will then be a 10-day comment period in which you can write to me and make it a comment if you would like to do so. Following that 10-day comment period, we will respond to all comments and make sure we answer all questions. And then sometime after that, likely within the next several weeks, definitely before the end of the year, we will finalize the designation letters. And once those letters are sent, the new high-risk erosion area designations will go into effect within the county. Following that official designation date, there will be a 60-day administrative appeals period. That process is explained in all of the designation letters, but affected property owners have the right to file an administrative appeal of the designation within 60 days of the designation date. Okay, so changing gears here a little bit to talk about Part 323 or high-risk erosion area regulations. So building anywhere on a designated property requires a permit. For example, a permit is required to, oops, my slides were doing this earlier when I was practicing. They like to jump ahead on me for some reason. But a permit is required to build or move a house or mobile home, build an addition onto an existing structure, build a garage, or construct a detached structure larger than 225 square feet on a permanent foundation. The permit's also required to install or replace a septic system. So some examples of permanent buildings include residential buildings, commercial buildings, industrial buildings, and institutional buildings, mobile homes, accessory buildings, swimming pools if they're enclosed, like roofed, or porches or decks if they are roofed and have walls, like a covered patio. There are many structures, however, in a high-risk erosion area that do not require a permit. So these include uncovered decks and patios, uncovered walkways and stairways, storage buildings like a shed measuring less than 225 square feet on a non-permanent foundation, as well as utilities that are not septic systems. So like a gas or a water line would not require a permit under high-risk erosion areas. Driveways and parking areas are another one that falls under the does not require a permit. So you might have noticed that we have two setback distances, the 30-year and the 60-year. For a structure to be built landward of the 30-year setback, oh, I did it again. It must meet readily movable structure criteria, as stated in the administrative rules. In addition to the administrative rules, EGLE has an external policy called, I believe it's WRD. I don't want to say it wrong, but it's linked on our website. If you go to that michigan.gov/shorelines, that explains the readily movable structure criteria in more detail. But those criteria include limits on the size and type of the foundation, the type of construction of the above foundation walls, the type of exterior siding, number of living units in one building, and access to the building. The goal here being that if a house is ever threatened by erosion, the property owner will be able to move it back more easily on their property. Those readily movable structure criteria specifically include a first floor foundation of 3,500 square feet or less, including attached garages, cantilevers and including attached garages, cantilevers, and covered or enclosed porches or decks. The foundation size of the garage, attached or detached, cannot exceed 676 square feet. The building's foundation can be a basement, crawl space, or pilings, but cannot be slab on grade, the exception there being for that 676 square foot garage. All above foundation walls must be stud frame construction or whole log. Exterior siding can be wood, vinyl, cement board, brick, cultured stone, or stucco. There can be no more than 4 living units in one building, and there must be sufficient access and acceptable grade for the building to be relocated if necessary. So if all those criteria are met, then the new building can be located at the 30-year setback. And sometimes I know it seems a little crazy about moving homes, but it is done with some regularity along our Great Lakes coastlines. We saw definitely an uptick of it during that last high water period. And so this is an example of a home in a high-risk erosion area on Lake Michigan that was picked up off its foundation and moved landward. So if a home or structure does not meet the readily movable structure criteria, such as a house greater than 3,500 square feet, then it has to be located landward of the 60-year setback. Septic systems are not readily movable structures, and they must always be located landward of the 60-year setback. So this diagram shows an example of where a new house could be built, and hopefully that's the last time. It shows where a new house can be built depending on whether it met the readily movable structure criteria. A house meeting readily movable structure criteria can be built closer to the shoreline, so up to that 30-year setback for the readily movable structures. And then larger homes and septic systems must be built further back behind that 60-year setback. And I want to make sure I mention that the Great Lakes Shorelines rules contain many provisions for a variety of situations, so that things like additions to non-conforming structures, rehabilitation of existing structures, and building on what we call substandard parcels, or parcels that can't meet the setback. It's very unlikely that a high-risk erosionary designation will result in not being able to build a new structure or addition. That new structure or addition just might have to be modified to meet a setback, meet readily movable structure criteria, or be placed on the landward side of an existing structure, or placed as far landward as possible, depending on the situation. And you can always contact your local EGLE staff or myself if you're planning a project in a high-risk erosion area, and we can talk through it before you begin planning to make sure that we meet those things like readily movable structure criteria. So our program website, again, michigan.gov/shorelines, has a link to the permit database MyEnviro portal where all applications are submitted. Once a complete application is received, EGLE staff have 60 days to review the file and make a permit decision. Depending on your project, again, there will likely be other local, state, or federal permits required. So a complete permit application includes the completed joint permit application in MyEnviro portal, the application fee, which ranges from $50 to $500 for most single-family homes and septic systems, things like that. It's between $50 and $100. A site plan and cross-section. And if you're working with an agent or a consultant, you'll need to provide that agent authorization letter as well. And on sites where a septic system is proposed, it's often helpful if you can provide a copy of that health department permit prior to issuance of our permit so that we can make sure that your septic system will comply with county codes before we place it in our permit. Okay, so to summarize, erosion is an ongoing process. Recession rate studies identify a hazard along the shoreline. The setbacks that are generated from those recession rate studies are a planning tool for locating structures a safe distance away from the erosion hazard. Within a high-risk erosion area, an EGLE permit is required prior to construction of permanent buildings, septic systems, things like homes, garages, etc. So we'll go over here in a moment how you can ask a question now during our quick Q&A session. But if you would like to make an official comment on the Gogebic County High-Risk Erosion Areas Update Study, you can do so to me, Zach Chamberlain, by 5 p.m. on November 10th, 2025. I believe they're going to put my contact information in the chat as well. But if you're listening in on the phone, you can write to me via email at Chamberlain, CHAMBERLIN, the letter Z, at michigan.gov, or you can write a letter to EGLE Water Resources Division, P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7958. So again, if you'd like to make a comment, please do so by November 10th to either my email address or to my office there in Lansing. Okay, so again, I want to make sure I point out for last time that michigan.gov/shorelands, where you can learn more about the study. It's actually one of the first things you see right there is new studies. So you'll see the link to the this Gogebic County study. You can learn more about other high-risk erosion areas, how to apply for a permit, the information required for a permit application, and who the EGLE staff you should contact out of our Marquette district office for permitting and pre-application meetings, things like that. Okay, so I think, Ryan, we're going to be ready to move into our Q&A session.
Yep, you got it, Zach. Yeah, thanks for providing the information and presentation. We've been putting some stuff in the chat, including the contact information for you and making comments, and then that shoreline management webpage is also in the chat. So yeah, we're going to start taking questions. So if you have a question, right now, this is our question and answer period that we can help answer. You can either type your question in the Q&A box. You'll see that in your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Just type it in, send it to us. Or if you'd like to ask your question verbally, you can raise your hand by clicking the raise hand icon, and you can use your microphone that's in your computer or what you're calling into to ask your question. We'll basically call on you if your hand's raised, and then we'll unmute you. You can unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question. If we have anybody on the phone who's a phone-in caller, you can select #2 on your phone, and that will raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll call on you using the last 4 digits of your phone number, and then you'll be able to ask your question. All right, so I've got one question in the Q&A box right now. The person wants to know, can I get the current annual rate calculation for my designated parcel?
If you email me, I can look it up. And if you email me with your parcel number or your address, I can pull it up out of our data and let you know what that is.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Zach. And Zach's contact info is in the chat, and we'll also provide it again along with that mailing address after we're done with this Q&A session. So if there are any other questions and you'd like to ask at this point, feel free to type those in or raise your hand in Zoom and we'll answer it. And if there aren't further questions today, what we'll do is we'll show Zach's contact information again and review how to make a comment. And then we'll move towards closing out this public information session. So we'll give it a couple more seconds here. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
If you prefer to not make or ask your question publicly, feel free to contact me. I'll be online tomorrow. If you would rather ask your question just one-on-one.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks, Zach. And I think this is a good segue to move on to the next slide, which is Zach's contact information. So this is how Zach can be reached in case you want to ask a question one-on-one like you mentioned, or to make a comment on the high-risk erosion area update. All right. So we'll leave that up for another couple seconds in case you want to take a photo of it or busy writing it down. And we'll read it one more time. Zach it's chamberlinz@michigan.gov is the email. chamberlinz@michigan.gov. Or you can send a letter to EGLE Water Resources Division, Post Office Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7958. And as Zach mentioned, the update, you can provide comments related to the update until November 10th. All right, next slide, Zach. Oh, I think that wraps us up. I guess any closing comments before we leave tonight, Zach?
Just wanted to thank everyone again for being here with us tonight. Hope it was informational. And again, feel free to contact me over the next several days if you want to discuss the results of the study more, or go online there to michigan.gov/shorelines where you can look at the entire report if you would like.
All right, many thanks, Zach. Last thing I'll leave you with is just a reminder that this public meeting was recorded, and it'll be posted on our YouTube channel in a couple days, so you'll be able to find it there in case you want to watch it again. All right, so thank you all again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your night.